Greetings and welcome to the Elementality podcast. So excited to have Jeff Wolniewicz. Did I get that right, Jeff?
Nailed it. Impressive.
Okay, we're gonna start over. We're gonna do it again. Here we go. Greetings and welcome to the Elementality podcast. So excited for our chat today with Jeff Wolniewicz in Buffalo, New York. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it. I am equally as excited to be here. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. So, what I'd love to do is just back up and start at the beginning. And maybe you can just walk us through a little bit. What was the dream, right? Like, why did you get into the business of giving financial advice?
I'm going to have to answer this in two parts.
That's fine. You can't have three. You can have two.
I'll go with two. The why I got in and the why I stayed in, because there's an important distinction between those two. The first phase of my life was about athletics. I played college sports and was very focused on that as a life and being as successful as I could be. But it also meant I didn't have a lot of relevant job experience. So when that kind of phase of my life ended and it was time to grow up and be a real adult with a real job, candidly, I had trouble. And I didn't have a lot of experience in a lot of different fields. And then an internship with Northwestern Mutual, or not even an internship, a full-time position with Northwestern Mutual popped up, and they were willing to accept me. So it was a job that I could get. What was really the bottom line. And it was something that I was interested in because I was strong in math and finance and enjoyed those topics. But the truth is, I was just like, oh, okay, you'll actually hire me? Great. And I'll see how this goes once I'm here. It ended up being a fortunate accident, which I'll kind of go into phase two of that answer of why I stayed in. I love it and I love the work. Intellectually, I find it really engaging, learning all the different topics, whether it's insurance, investments, planning, the psychology aspect of the work we do, the work with people and the interpersonal relationships. It's awesome seeing people kind of where you start from, building that relationship and seeing that grow and change over time. And just even seeing progress, like, okay, even from a net worth statement, from where we start to where we go, and like the change in people's personality around money and where they are in their lives, like there's so many aspects of the work itself that is so rewarding that I couldn't have ever anticipated at the very beginning. And that's why I stay in and why I find, what I do so awesome, frankly, today. But it was an accident at the beginning or something that just kind of fell into my lap. And then today it's something that I'm really passionate about. And I see the impact of, on a day-to-day basis, which is cool.
Yeah. It's funny. It's how often that answer comes up, sort of like I got into this kind of by accident. I didn't really know. I mean, I applied to be a security guard and I didn't realize the ad said securities instead of security. I actually didn't even know the difference between the two anyway, but so many people get into the business by accident. And then there's this moment, it's actually probably a series of reminders of like, hey, there's deep impact here. And so I'm curious, I'd like to kind of circle back to some of those moments in a minute.
Yeah.
So be thinking about that. But what I'm curious about is how would you answer, like, who is your work for?
I think, I do my best work and not coincidentally enjoy the work with busy professionals. They're young families, typically in their 30s and 40s, household income, 200,000 or more, typically love to play golf. And
let me ask you real quickly, because I know, is that actually the right phrase, typically, or is it like they must love to play golf?
For me, it's typically on that side, because I realize it is a little bit thing, and I'm not just going to limit the business to that world, because there's so many wonderful people in different things. My business under part planning certainly has that golf niche to it. But what I'm interested in is like the passion that comes along with that. So just people that have, certain things or aspects of life that are kind of experience driven. Like the way that golf is something that is such a big part of my life, I think a lot of, kind of my passion actually is supporting people that certainly want to make golf a part of their lives, but also spend, maybe this will come up later, but they want to spend less time worrying about money and more time doing what they love, whether that thing is what they love, whether it's golf or whether it's another passion or another aspect of their life. So I'm going to go with typically, if that's okay.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I love that last phrase though. Like want to rather than focusing on, and I can't remember exactly what you said, but rather than focusing on money, focusing on the experiences or what they love.
Yeah. And I think the last thing, kind of a behavioral descriptor, I guess, or what I would describe is like people who want to create their future rather than simply participate in it. And I don't know, like the way I kind of phrase this is like, do you ever go somewhere and like you get to your destination or you're at a stoplight and all of a sudden you think it's like, whoa, how did I get here? Like you just kind of sleptwalk through that part of the drive. And I think, on a broader scale, I think if we're not careful, sometimes that happens, especially when we're busy and going through that phase of our lives with, trying to get the next promotion or, grow our family or buy the next house, that sometimes that moment happens where it's like, whoa, how did I get here right now? And what's next? And I think just pausing a little bit and like, there's some real impact in us having a deep conversation with people about like where they're going. Like what is the intention right now? And, once we kind of like start being thoughtful about the destination, then understanding the financial aspects and helping guide and coach around how to connect those two dots, kind of the Google Maps version, if you will, of like understanding where you're going, where you are today, and then helping make the financial decisions to connect those two. And just bringing some intentionality back to our lives and kind of building them on purpose rather than just being along for the ride.
It's so good. So good. Tell me, if you could, just does a story come to mind, an experience that you've had recently or in the past with a client where it's been like, oh, geez, that's what I'm talking about?
Yeah. We'll just, a couple actually. This is fairly recent too. He worked for a company, they do kind of like dairy manufacturing type products. And he was in a pretty prominent position, but frustrated with it. And, boss was kind of checked out, felt kind of a ceiling on his role. And I remember very specifically, this started pre-COVID. So this was December, I think 2019, when they came in. We had lunch in my office at the time, him and his wife, and it just started talking about what possible. He was kind of at his wit's end about, his current position, and started talking about taking time out, about starting a business, what would be possible, where they could pull certain levers. And we just talked through that. And, fast forward to today, and he had left that company with a couple other executives and went out, found a bunch of venture capital money, and they built a 100,000 square foot plus facility. They've launched a business. They've got VC backing. And now, even before the first unit of production, they are in the black. They're positive just from contracts signed before they even produced anything, and north of 150 employees. And all of that work was his, that him and his wife. I should credit the wife a lot as well, because what she did at home, supporting everything that was going on during the business formation, was incredible, because they have two kids that are in high school at the time. But he figured out all the business stuff, but it was the conversation over lunch in our office where we really went through and understood and like just said, yeah, you can do this. Where it went from this crazy thing that was like, oh, what if we started a business, to no, really, let's have that conversation. Like, if you were going to do this, what could we do and how could we make this happen? And it went from, oh, this is some wild thing, I'd love to do this, but I'll never do it, to, oh no, if we're going to do it, let's do it. And it was just the spark, the kindling for the flame that went there. And now it's incredible. It was a whole lot of hard work that he put in, but now it's real. And, that's one example that's worked out well. But, in small versions or medium versions or big versions, I think that transformation over time is kind of the cool part of this work with clients, if done well.
Yeah. No, I always think of that as like, sometimes I even call it the unspeakable thing. Like often clients come to us with like a thing that they want to do. Yeah. And what most people don't realize about real financial advice or real financial planning is that so much of the value is around framing that unspeakable thing into something like, I just had this feeling that I want to start a business. We thought we wanted to move here. I've always wondered what it'd be like to spend some time in another country. And I remember a client coming to me saying, hey, we want to take a sabbatical and live in the RV and homeschool the kids across the country for 6 months while they're still young. And I remember saying to them, I already knew the answer. I mean, what they were asking for was permission.
Yeah.
Right. And they were like, financially, could we do that? Like, is that, and I already knew the answer. The answer was, of course, because I knew them well enough to know. But I remember saying to them, like, well, wait, before I go spend a bunch of time doing all these calculations, if it's not, if the numbers work out, would you go?
Yeah.
And I remember that feeling of them looking at each other like, whoa, like, yeah.
Yep.
So it's so cool to hear a story about that same idea of like, there was a thing. Sometimes I call this goal clarification, right? Just clarifying what the actual goals are and that they change over time. Tell another story. I mean, can you think of a conversation you had with a client that was like, Stephen Covey has this old quote that the last thing and I'm paraphrasing, the last thing you want to do is spend your whole life climbing up a ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
And you've sort of pointed at this idea of like intentionality is the word you used.
Yep.
Have you had any experiences you could share with us around where that intentionality became more clear for people and it changed something? And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm doing it.
No, it's okay. It's fun to think through these things and remember them. Honestly, candidly, it's good for myself too, and like self-confidence thinking through about some of these things and to remember conversations like of this. But there's another client who's become a friend, honestly, that we have been working together for a long time, probably 6 or 7 years. And he was just a very, very diligent saver and was very dead set on retirement at 50. Okay. A very, very, very young age, traditionally speaking, and not like ultra high income, just a very, very, low means, high saver. But to the point where it was almost like excessive delayed gratification. And we finally started having, I have my RLP from George Kinder and went through the life planning program. And after I did that, we kind of restarted the relationship for lack of a better way of framing it. And, went back to some of those conversations and, what he was able to find out through good questions and just good listening was that it wasn't really about the whole goal of being able to retire early, retire at 50 was just because he was more frustrated with some of the current situations, both professionally and things along those lines, where he decided to make changes. He decided to pull back a little bit from a work perspective, not take so much on his plate, but to the intentionality part, loves camping and loves travel, and decided with COVID actually to take more time and work remotely. Like went and found and rented a cabin for a month that had Wi-Fi signal and just went and worked out in the cabin by the lake and started doing and bringing more of those things that were like, okay, I want to quit work at 50 so that I can do this stuff, but just brought more of that back into his present now. And this goal of retirement at 50 is now kind of fading away a little bit because there's more of this balance and more of these things that he was truly aiming for in his current life now, rather than as just some distant goal. And that's, for example, it's still a work in progress for him on that side of what he feels he can do, because there's still a good deal of identity tied to his career, but he's made dramatic changes from 2-3 years ago, and feels much more balanced, I'd say, in his life, even though it's not really the best word, but he feels like he's doing much more of what he wants to do now instead of trying to work and save just so we can do that maybe later.
Yeah, so good. So good to me, because I think that, like, again, you're pointing at things that I don't think people always understand about the role of a real financial planner, right? Like this goal clarification over time, the idea that you don't know where, none of us do. Like we don't know where we're all making this up along the way. To have somebody help you frame those things up is so cool. Let me, as we sort of wrap up here, let me ask you, what, if we were to look back, let's just go 5 years from now. Actually, let's go 3 years. December 19th, 2025, right? Yeah, 3 years from now. If it was that day and you were looking back over the last 3 years, what's, and this is just a moment, like, nobody else is listening to this, Jeff. It's just you and I. Like, what would you hope your impact would be if we were looking back 3 years from today?
It's a great question.
I know. I'm just kidding. Thank you. That's not what I meant to say.
I'm going to be a bit repetitive. I said something earlier that's just kind of what I feel like is at the core of what I think our purpose is in work. And it's that every client that we work with, incrementally from the time I started with them to that point in 2024, is spending less time worrying about money and more of their time doing what they love and with the people that they love and feel. I think the kicker I'll add to that is they feel good about doing it. Like they feel content and present in their lives. And that's a few different influences. That's Morgan Housel coming through on that side, but all of those things coming together, but just that people feel more purposeful, intentional, in control of their lives and money so that they can worry less about that and spend more time doing what they love.
Yeah, I think the only thing to say to that is amen. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us.
My pleasure, Carl. Hope that was great. And I really enjoyed it. Hope you did as well. And thank you for having me on.
Cheers.